Hello, how are we? My name is Diatom Dave from Fun Science in Cheltenham, and thank you very much to Kent Libraries for having me here today to do some fantastic flight science with you. So let's start at the beginning. We'll go over a little bit of theory, because all science involves a little bit of theory, thinking about things before you get to work. Because if you didn't think about how things worked before you started building things, the things that you built wouldn't work. So let's think a little bit about flight. Flight, taking to the sky or space even. There is a force that is pulling us all down to the ground. And you have to beat that force if you want to get into the sky. Does anyone know what the force holding us down on the ground is called? Gravity. Well done. So gravity is the force that's holding you down to the ground. Now, if you want to fly, you have to beat gravity, which means you have to generate or create a force which is bigger than gravity. Now, it's quite difficult to make people fly because people are quite heavy compared to, for instance, a piece of paper. Okay? So we're not going to try and make any people fly today. We're going to stick to pieces of paper because pieces of paper feel gravity a lot less than people do, because how much gravity pulls you down is related to how heavy you are. Okay, so it's harder to make an elephant fly than it is to make a person fly, and it's harder to make a person fly than it is to make a piece of paper fly. So we'll keep it small and light and simple. Okay, so we're only going to have to generate quite a small force to get our pieces of paper into the air. Now, that force, well, there are two forces that we can use, and we're going to explore both today. We're going to start with one called lift. Okay, lift. Lift is a force which is used by hot air balloons, aeroplanes, birds, helicopters, parachutes, and some other things, I'm sure, to keep them in the air. So, gravity, holding you down on the ground. Paragliders, that's a good one. That is another one. Well done. Hang gliders, microlights. Yeah, there's loads, isn't there? And then you want to generate some lift that's going to push you up into the air. So here's the ground. You want to generate some lift that's going to push you up into the air, right? There's a few different ways you can do this. Here's one that I'll show you before we start building. This is a tea bag. Now you can do this at home if you can find the right tea bags. Now the kind of tea bags you need are what I would call a hotel tea bag. Some of the grown-ups might know what I mean by that. They're the posh tea bags you get in hotels, but you can also buy them in the shops. And they start off like this. They're sort of folded over and they normally have a string coming out and they're full of tea. Now, if you cut the stringy bit off and open it out and empty out all the tea, you have a paper tube made of very light paper. It's like tissue paper, okay? So if you open that tube out like this and you stand it up, preferably on a plate or something not flammable. I'm going to do it on a piece of paper on a wooden table because I like to live on the edge like that. But you should use something not flammable. Right, you take your tea bag, you take a lighter, only to be done with parental supervision, this one. You take a lighter or a match and you look for the seam along the side of the tea bag. So there's the seam there. You find that seam, and when you find it, you set it on fire. There we go. Now the tea bag is going to burn downwards from the top. And as it does, it's generating heat. And that heat is filling the tube. Woo! And as it fills the tube, it lifts the tea bag into the air. It's coming back down again now. Watch this. There it is. Can you see? It's turned into a little pile of ash. There you are. Oh dear, got dust in my computer now. There we go. So as it burned, it did two things. Number one, it turned the tea bag into a little pile of ash, which is even lighter than the tea bag. Okay, so it made it even lighter. And number two, as it burned, it filled the tea bag, the tube inside, full of hot air. Now, hot air is less dense or less heavy, if you like, than cold air, like the colder air around the tea bag. Okay, so as that tea bag filled with hot air and became lighter and lighter, it was lifted up into the air. And that's exactly how hot air balloons were invented, more or less. So the Montgolfier brothers didn't set their hot air balloons on fire, because they wouldn't last very long, would they? But they did realize that if you put a fire underneath a piece of paper, it will sort of waft about in the wind like this. And that's how they came up with the idea for hot air balloons. So that was one way to generate some lift to beat gravity and get off the ground. Here's one that you can play with outside. Okay, we're going to start flying. So take a piece of paper. What I'd like you to do for now is to take another piece of A4 paper, okay? And I'd like you to fold it in half. This way, widthways, if you like. So along the short edge, like that, like a book. Fold it in half like that, okay? Once you've folded it in half, take one of the corners, and you're not going to fold it, okay? Because when you fold like this, you make a crease, don't you? You make a crease like that. I don't want you to make a crease. What I'd like you to do is to take one of the corners and bend it. Bend it down so that it touches the fold that you've made. So there's my fold, and I've just bent that corner down so it touches the fold, somewhere around the middle of the fold. So what you've ended up with is this funny curly shape. Okay, then I'd like you to take the other corner here, this corner here, and bend that one down as well to the same place. So this one's a little bit tricky with two hands. You might want to ask someone for some help to hold this together. So you should end up with something like that, this strange, curly looking, like a strange pair of binoculars, almost. It could be a good mask. No, maybe not. So you should end up with something like that, okay? Now, what you need to do is take your stapler, if you've got one. I haven't. I have a stapler, I don't have any staples, which is a problem. So instead, I'm going to use a piece of sticky tape. I'm going to take a piece of sticky tape like that, and I'm going to...
Dave, I think a couple of the children just need that bit explained again about the bending over. If you can show them that bit again, please.
Yeah, okay. Well, and there. So, taking my piece of paper, I folded it in half. Creased it along there. Nice sharp crease. And then I've taken one of these free corners and I've bent it like this. So what I'm not doing is putting it down on the table and creasing it, okay? Because it won't work. What you want is this loop. You're making a sort of a loop. So you're taking the corner and you're bending it down so it meets the crease there. So you end up with this curly shape. And then take the other corner on the same side, if you like, take the other corner and fold that one down to the crease as well. So you end up with this. So it looks a little bit like a paper aeroplane, but it's curly like that. And then you take your piece of sellotape and you put it so that it covers all three leaves, if you like, here, 1, 2, 3. So the two that you've bent down and the crease in the middle, okay? And what you end up with is, ta-da, that shape. So if you look at it from above, it looks kind of like, a little bit like a paper aeroplane. But if you look from the front or the back, you see it has these loops. Hello, like that, okay? Once you've got that, take your hole punch if you have one. If you don't have one, then a sharp pencil or a skewer or something like that will do it. Something for poking. And make a hole just behind where you've sticky taped the leaves together. So there, just behind there. Make sure it's not too close to the edge of the paper, or when you attach your string, it will rip straight through. In fact, I'm going to use a tiny bit of sellotape to strengthen that. There we go. Right, so what you should have now is this shape with a hole here. Now take your piece of string or your piece of cotton. So you will need about 2 meters, 1 meter or 2 meters. I'm just going to use a little bit for the sake of showing you. Get off. Take your string or your cotton and tie it through that hole. So push it through both sides of the hole. Hello, easier said than done. Get out of it. There we go. Through the hole and tie a little knot at one end. You might want to make it a double knot. There we go. Ta-da! There we are. So I now have a string dangling down from my kite. It'll be very hard to see on the camera because it's a very thin piece of black cotton, but it's dangling down from the kite there. And that's what you've made, a kite. So this, despite being made from a piece of paper, some sticky tape and a piece of string, this should actually fly. So what you've done is you've created a special shape with small holes at the front and big holes at the back. See here are the big holes down there and little holes at the front. Now, if you take this outside, the best weather for this is not completely still, but not completely windy. So a slightly breezy day, okay? If you take this outside on a slightly breezy day, and especially if you have a helper, you have them throw the kite up in the air, you let all the string out, you have your helper throw the kite up in the air, and then you start running in the other direction, pulling this string behind you. What should happen is this: the air will rush in through these little holes at the front, okay? And as it travels from the front of your kite to the back, this hole, this space gets bigger and bigger. Now that space, as it gets bigger and bigger, it allows that air to expand. So the air that's coming in through the hole at the front expands, which means it spreads out and takes up more space. And as it does that, it pushes in all directions, including up. So it pushes up on the wings of your kite, and that should send it up into the sky. Now, if you've ever flown a proper kite, like a bought one, I have one hanging on the wall just over there. It's a bird. It's a bird of prey kite. If you've ever flown a proper one, they can stay up for ages. These are not going to be the best kite you've ever flown, but they will fly. And they may take a little bit more practice, but they will fly. So keep an eye on the weather, and when it's just right, when it's nice and sunny, when it's not too windy but not completely still, take this outside and run around with it and see what happens. It should at least rise a little bit, and that is lift. You're generating lift, just like what's his name, Leonardo da Vinci had planned, right? You're generating lift just enough to beat gravity, and because the piece of paper is only very small and light, you don't need to generate very much. Good job. You can, of course, if you feel like doing an experiment, because science is all about experiments, you could try this with different materials. So I, for instance, I was at Cheltenham Science Festival last year, and I did a workshop about flight, amongst other things, and I was trying to make the biggest kite that I possibly could. Oh no, it was the biggest paper aeroplane. I was going for the biggest paper aeroplane I could make. And we tried with this paper, we tried sticking it together, and that didn't really work. We tried with pieces of newspaper, that didn't really work because it was too thin and too floppy, okay, to make a wing. And what I ended up doing was getting these big pieces of artist's card from a art supply shop, and they were perfect for making massive paper aeroplanes. So you can do a similar thing. You can experiment with different types of material: newspaper, wrapping paper, wallpaper. So get as many different papers as you can and see how many kites you can make and how big you can make them. That is what experimenting is all about. Right. Another quick little demo. You can, of course, decorate your kites as well. You may find it easier to decorate a second piece of paper and then make a second kite now that you've had a practice, because I can imagine this will be a bit tricky to decorate without destroying it. But call this Mark 1. This is the practice one. Okay. Here's a little demonstration of some lift, and it's another one that you can try at home if you have a hairdryer and a ping pong ball. Okay. Some of you might have seen this one before. Maybe you saw it on YouTube, but you haven't seen it for real. Normally, I say that at parties and workshops. You've seen it on YouTube, now see it for real. But of course, I'm just a video on the internet. So anyway, never mind. You can try this yourself. Take your ping pong ball, take your hairdryer and switch it on full power. And then take the ping pong ball and very delicately, carefully, put it above the hairdryer and let go. And hopefully you'll get this. How about that? Now, I can turn it this way. I can turn it that way. Oh, it's disappeared. There we go. Hey, oh, that got hot. Should have guessed that. No, that got hot. Now this works better with. Oh, thank you. This works better with some hairdryers than it does with others. I had to go through 2 or 3 hairdryers before I found one that worked really well. But what's happening is the hairdryer is blowing hot air up. That's what they're for. That's what they're designed to do. They blow hot air. It's blowing hot air and it's blowing it upwards. Now, the ping pong ball, being very light, is light enough that that hot air rising, that lift that's being generated, can push it upwards into the air. Now, that's easy enough to understand. The tricky thing is, why is it that the ping pong ball isn't just shooting off to the left or the right? Why isn't it shooting off in any direction? That's a bit more tricky to understand, but I'll try and explain it as simply as I can. And this is also really important to the way that things like aeroplanes fly. Okay. Would it work on the cool setting? That's a good question. Probably, because it's actually not so much to do with the heat, it's more to do with the movement of the air. So if your hairdryer has a cool setting, which is still quite powerful, then it might work. For instance, if I set this to low power, this only has low power and high power. If I set it to low power, it doesn't work very well. Set it to high power. So cool might work as long as it's quite fast. Now, why it's not flying off in any direction is this. As this sort of jet or stream of air is moving upwards very quickly, it's creating an area of what's called low pressure. So air that's moving fast creates low pressure. Now, actually, the way wings are designed, they're designed to take advantage of this. Fast-moving air creates low pressure. Slow-moving air creates high pressure. And wings are actually shaped so that the air flowing over the top is moving faster than the air moving underneath. And that's what makes the aeroplane rise, because high pressure pushes towards low pressure. Now, what this is doing is creating a stream of low pressure air. The air around it is relatively high pressure. And that means that as the ping pong ball deviates or moves one way or the other, the high pressure air around it says, don't think so, and pushes it back into the middle. So it's kind of trapped. You've almost created a kind of a cage of air or a prison of air, high pressure air around the ping pong ball. And that's what keeps it floating in the middle like that. So again, that's one to try at home. I didn't want to send you all scrabbling for hair dryers and ping pong balls at short notice, but if you've got one, it's one you can try later. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoy experimenting with these vehicles, because they're so easy to make, as you've seen, and you only need a few things to make them. And there's all sorts of things that you can change. You could change the shape of your kite if you felt like it. So there's a few things that you can change, and changing things and seeing what happens as a result is what we call an experiment. So happy experimenting. Enjoy the rest of your reading challenge. Bye-bye.